Lily Hawke was the quiet girl with a sketchbook, Max Turner the boy with a criminal record, and together they held the darkest secret Fairview had ever known. When Richard Hawke, Lily's protective father, was found murdered in his own home, no one imagined the truth would lead to a forbidden teen romance, a trail of hidden messages, and a plan that had been weeks in the making. Fairview was the kind of place where time seemed to slow down. Tucked between forested hills and winding country roads, the small town looked like something out of a postcard. Families had lived there for generations, passing down homes, farms, and local traditions. It wasn't unusual for neighbors to leave, their doors unlocked, or for kids to ride their bikes to the general store without a second thought. There hadn't been a serious crime in over a decade, and most people liked it that way. They valued routine, community, and peace. At the heart of this quiet town was Richard Hawke. He was a man who carried himself with a calm authority, someone others instinctively respected. A former police officer turned local handyman, he was well liked but kept mostly to himself. Since the sudden death of his wife, Richard had focused all his energy on raising his only daughter, Lily. He was known to be firm but fair, a man of principle who believed in hard work and discipline. He didn't socialize much, but if someone needed help fixing a roof or patching a fence, Richard was usually the first to show up. Lily was 17, on the cusp of adulthood, and very different from her father. Where Richard was reserved and grounded, Lily was full of energy and curiosity. She had her mother's eyes and a restless spirit that didn't quite fit in with Fairview's quiet pace. She did well in school, participated in local theatre, and spent hours sketching in her notebook. But beneath the surface, Lily struggled with the weight of her father's rules and the expectations placed on her. Richard monitored her phone, set strict curfews, and rarely allowed her to attend parties or social events. His protectiveness came from a place of love, but Lily often felt like she was living in a cage. Her friends could come and go freely, stay out late, and make mistakes. Lily, on the other hand, felt like every step she took was being watched. It was during the summer before her senior year that Lily met Max Turner. He wasn't from Fairview exactly. He lived in the neighboring town of Pinebrook, a place with a rougher reputation. Max had a history of trouble, fights at school, vandalism, and a few run-ins with the law. To the adults of Fairview, he was the kind of boy they warned their daughters about. But to Lily, he was something entirely different. He was charming, bold, and unlike anyone she had ever known. They met by chance at a music festival just outside town. What started as small talk turned into long conversations and secret meetings. Lily found herself drawn to Max in ways she didn't understand. He talked about running away, starting fresh, living life without limits. For a girl who felt stifled by her father's rules, it was intoxicating. She knew her father would never approve, so she kept it a secret. Every text, every visit, every plan, they were all hidden behind layers of lies. What Lily didn't realize was how quickly secrets can turn into something dangerous. Lily's secret relationship with Max quickly became the center of her world. What started as casual meetups turned into daily phone calls, long drives, and whispered promises in the dark. Every encounter was a rush, a mixture of excitement and fear that left her heart racing. She began lying more often, slipping out, late at night, claiming to be at a friend's house or staying after school for clubs that didn't exist. At first the lies were small and easy to manage, but as the relationship grew more intense, so did the need to keep it hidden. Max fed into Lily's sense of rebellion. He was reckless in a way that both thrilled and scared her. He smoked, skipped, school, and wasn't afraid to talk back to adults. Yet with her, he was gentle, attentive, and endlessly persuasive. He told her she was different from everyone else, that she didn't belong in a place like Fairview. He painted a future filled with freedom, just the two of them, far away from rules and watchful eyes. To Lily, it sounded like salvation. But back at home, things were falling apart. Richard sensed that something was wrong. Lily had become distant, moody, and secretive. She no longer smiled at dinner or joined him for their usual weekend hikes. Her grades started slipping, and she spent more time locked in her room. When he tried to talk to her, she either brushed him off or exploded in frustration. Richard, once patient and understanding, began to tighten his grip. He grounded her, took her phone, and forbade her from seeing anyone he didn't approve of. Then came the night he caught her sneaking in through the back door after midnight. Her shoes were muddy, her hair windblown, and she had no believable excuse. That was the final straw. Richard demanded answers, and when Lily refused to tell him the truth, he searched her phone. What he found made his blood run cold, dozens of texts and photos from Max Turner. Angry and betrayed, Richard confronted her and declared she was never to see Max again. He threatened to transfer her to a boarding school and even called Max's mother to warn her son to stay away. But instead of ending the relationship, Richard's reaction only pushed Lily and Max closer. They began meeting in more secluded places, old barns, abandoned sheds, even in the woods. Max started talking more about running away, leaving Fairview behind for good. He told Lily that her father would never let her live her own life, and that the only way they could be happy was if they broke free. At first, these were just words, dramatic ideas tossed around by two desperate teens. But soon, Max's tone shifted. He began speaking with more conviction, more anger. He blamed Richard for everything, calling him controlling, cruel, and even dangerous. What Lily didn't know was that Max had begun talking to some of his friends about their situation. He hinted that something had to be done, that Richard was a problem that needed solving. It started as venting, nothing serious, or so it seemed. But darkness has a way of creeping in quietly. By the time Lily realized how far things had gone, it was already too late. It was a cold and rainy Saturday in October when everything changed. The kind of day where the skies never brightened and the wind seemed to whisper through the trees.
Fairview was quiet as always, but there was an unsettling stillness in the air.
That night, just after 10 p.m., a frantic 911 call came from a neighbor who lived 2 houses down from the Hawkes. She reported hearing a loud bang, like a gunshot, followed by silence. Moments later, flashing red and blue lights broke through the darkness, casting an eerie glow on the soaked pavement outside the Hawke home. When police arrived, the front door was closed but unlocked. Inside, the living room lights were still on. Richard Hawke was found slumped in an armchair, a single gunshot wound to his chest. There was no sign of struggle, no forced entry. His wallet, keys, and watch were untouched. The television was still playing. Nothing appeared out of place, except for the lifeless body of the man who had once been the pillar of discipline and order in his home. Officers quickly secured the scene, looking for any sign of a break-in. But the house was clean, too clean. No shattered windows, no overturned furniture, no signs that someone had rushed in or out. It didn't look like a robbery. It looked personal. Upstairs, they found Lily sitting on the floor of her bedroom, knees pulled to her chest, eyes wide with shock. She was barefoot, wearing pajamas, and claimed she had been asleep when it happened. She said she hadn't heard the shot. She said she woke up to the sound of sirens, but her story raised questions. The house wasn't large, and a gunshot in the living room would have echoed up the stairs. The timing didn't sit right either. She couldn't explain why the security cameras around the house hadn't recorded anything. When asked about them, she shrugged and said they'd been acting up lately. Investigators made note of every detail: her calm demeanor, her lack of visible tears, the way she avoided eye contact when asked about her father. In the hours that followed, police began their search for answers. They canvassed the neighborhood, looking for witnesses, checking security footage from nearby homes, and pulling phone records. Suspicion started to grow when Lily's phone activity showed several late-night messages to Max Turner. Some of them had been deleted, but the timestamps remained. Investigators found that the last message from her phone had been sent just before 9:30 p.m., about half an hour before the reported gunshot. They tried to reach Max, but he didn't respond to calls or texts. It wasn't until the next morning that he was found at a friend's house, claiming he had been there all night. But his alibi wasn't solid. The friend hesitated, gave inconsistent details, and seemed nervous during questioning. As the pieces slowly started to come together, the question shifted from who could have done this to why someone would want Richard Hawke dead. And beneath that question lay an even darker one. Had someone inside the house helped make it happen? Investigators turned their focus to the one place secrets are hardest to hide: the digital world. They began carefully combing through Lily and Max's phone records, social media activity, and deleted texts. What they found began to paint a troubling picture. Over the past 2 months, the couple had exchanged hundreds of messages, many of which had been wiped clean before the night of the murder. But thanks to backups and recovery software, fragments remained, enough to raise serious concerns. Some messages were harmless: plans to meet, complaints about school, and casual talk. But others hinted at something more. Phrases like, "We just need to get out," "He'll never let us go," and "once it's done, we'll be free," appeared again and again. While no single message was a direct confession, the pattern was clear: anger, desperation, and a desire to escape that was beginning to tip into something darker. Attention quickly shifted to the security system. Richard, known for being cautious, had installed a full set of outdoor cameras just months earlier. But when investigators checked the system, they found it had been manually disabled 2 days before the murder. The footage from that night was gone. When questioned again, Lily stuck to her story. The system had been glitching, but technicians confirmed that the cameras hadn't failed. They had been turned off from inside the house. With suspicion mounting, Max was brought in for formal questioning. He looked tired and avoided eye contact. When asked about the messages, he claimed they were just fantasies, nothing real. He said they had talked about running away, not murder. But his story lacked details. When pressed about his whereabouts that night, he said he had stayed over at a friend's house, but the friend's version of events changed with each retelling. There were no photos, no messages, no proof that Max had ever been there. A search warrant was issued for Max's phone and his room. What police found next changed everything. Hidden deep in the phone's storage was a deleted note. The title was simple: Plan. The contents were vague but chilling. It listed items like gloves, a flashlight, and quiet entry. It mentioned timing and waiting until the house is still. There was even a mention of turning off cameras. Still, it wasn't enough for an arrest. There was no weapon, no fingerprints, and no eyewitness. But the pressure was building. Police expanded their search beyond the house and town limits. They canvassed the woods behind Max's home, looking for anything that might have been discarded or hidden. After 2 long days, they found it, a shallow hole, covered with leaves and twigs. Inside was a small handgun wrapped in a plastic bag. It matched the caliber used in Richard Hawke's murder. Ballistics testing confirmed the weapon was the one used that night. Even more damning, Max's fingerprints were found on the magazine. He was arrested on charges of first-degree murder. But the investigation wasn't over. As the evidence against Max solidified, police turned back to Lily. Her role in the crime was no longer in question. It was time to find out just how deep she was involved. After Max's arrest, the case seemed nearly complete. The murder weapon had been found, the digital evidence was damning, and his alibi had fallen apart. Yet investigators still felt something was missing. The killing of Richard Hawke didn't seem like a crime of impulse. It felt calculated, deliberate. Max may have pulled the trigger, but there was an eerie sense that he hadn't acted alone. All eyes turned back to Lily. Lily had remained quiet since the night of the murder. She rarely spoke beyond short, rehearsed answers, and often appeared emotionless, as if still in shock. But now, with Max behind bars, investigators had leverage. They brought her in once. More, not as a grieving daughter, but as a possible accomplice. They laid out the evidence, the texts, the disabled cameras, the open front door, and the timeline that suggested she had not only known about Max's intentions, but may have helped plan them. At first, Lily denied everything. She insisted she had no idea what Max was going to do. But when confronted with the recovered messages and the security footage showing her moving through the house just minutes before the estimated time of death, her resolve began to crack. She asked for a moment alone. When the detective returned, Lily was crying, not hysterically but quietly, like someone who had finally run out of lies. She confessed in pieces. She admitted that Max had talked about killing her father for weeks, but she never thought he was serious. She said she was scared, confused, and didn't know how to stop him. But then she admitted that 2 nights before the murder, she had disabled the security cameras. She had unlocked the front door that night, knowing Max would be coming. And most shocking of all, she had texted him a single word shortly before 9:30 p.m. Now. To Lily, it had felt like surrender. She claimed she didn't believe Max would really go through with it, that she thought maybe he would just confront her father and they'd run away together. But when the gunshot echoed through the house, she knew exactly what had happened. Instead of calling for help, she went upstairs and waited. With her confession, Lily was arrested and charged as an accomplice to murder. Her involvement shattered the town's belief that she had simply been a victim of Max's manipulation. The community was stunned. People who had known the Hawkes for years struggled to understand how a quiet teenager from a respected family could become entangled in something so dark. The trial drew national attention. Max was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Lily, tried separately as a juvenile, received a lengthy sentence in a state correctional facility. Her lawyers argued she had been groomed and coerced, but the prosecution pointed to her actions, the planning, the deception, the silence. Richard Hawke was laid to rest on a cold morning, not far from the woods where the weapon had been found. Fairview, once quiet and trusting, would never be the same. A town that prided itself on safety had been shaken by betrayal from within. And in the end, a father's love and a daughter's longing for freedom collided in the most tragic way possible.